And welcome everybody to another edition of the GSMC Sports Podcast, brought to you by the GSMC Sports Network. As always, I'm your host Kenneth Grunfelder, and it's great to have you guys here on this Tuesday, April 8th. We have a lot to cover on the show today, like we normally do. But before I get into all that, just want to remind you guys, as always, to tip or donate, get your comments recognized. Make sure to hit that super chat button in the chat if you want to see me acknowledge any thought or comment you may have throughout the live broadcast. It makes the show more lively, more entertaining between myself, the host, and you guys, the viewers. We appreciate you guys' viewership each and every day, so any contribution you can make to the show means the world to us as we put out content for you guys each and every day. And also, the other way to help out the show is by going to the link at the bottom of the show segment on the ticker, GSMCPodcast.net. That is GSMCPodcast.net. So let's get into what we are going to discuss for today. So we're going to start off the show. We are going to recap the national championship game from last night. The Florida Gators winning the national championship, knocking off the Houston Cougars. Very entertaining game last night. Came down to the final play of the game, although there was not a shot that was put up. We will get into it. So Florida ended up winning last night. They defeated Houston 65-63. So we'll get into that in just a second. In the second part of the show, we will talk more about the NFL draft. So there were reports that the Browns could end up drafting Travis Hunter. So we will get into that and talk about the Giants. They're also going to be meeting with Abdul Carter. Talk about Shedeur Sanders a little bit. Also the running backs, because this is a very rich running back class for this upcoming draft. We'll get into all that. Then we'll talk more about the torpedo bats. I wanted to talk about what Rob Manfred, the commissioner, had to say on the topic. And I was originally going to talk about it yesterday, but, the Vladimir Guerrero stuff came out, so, the contract stuff. So I had to bump that to today. Then we will talk about the Cowboys acquiring Joe Milton. We talked about that when it was reported last week, but I just wanted to give you my thoughts on that. And then in the final part of the show, we will talk about the Kansas City Chiefs. We'll do a season overview on the Kansas City Chiefs, how their season went, and what they've done in the offseason. And that will be the final season overview that we do. We have covered every single team in the NFL. So, like I said yesterday, we got to figure out what we're going to talk about in that fifth segment. So, let's get into the first topic, which is recapping the national championship game. So, like I said, it was a very entertaining game. And it kind of went similar to how Florida's games have gone in this tournament. They have trailed in these games, and they find a way to come back and win, and that's exactly what happened yesterday. And I had that same feeling throughout the entire second half. Now, I think the deficit got to as much as 12, I want to say. Houston was leading for the majority of the game. And Florida didn't come back by, these barrage of three-pointers like we saw against Texas Tech, for example. It was different. Now, the one thing I'll say is in the first half was, their best player, Walter Clayton Jr. He was scoreless in the first half. Couldn't get anything going. Houston was doing a great job. They were making things difficult for him. And like I said, did not score in the first half. Will Richard, though, and it was talked about constantly on the telecast, he really stepped up in the first half. He kept Florida in this game. Now, at the half, the score was 31-28. So, game was still in reach. Like I said, Houston, widened their gap at certain points during the game, but Florida was able to come back and win this game. LJ Cryer, once again, a good performance for him, 19 points. He went 6 of 18 from the field, which is not great, but, was their leading scorer for the Cougars last night. But like I said, it was a very entertaining game. And, we've been saying Florida is battle-tested. It's just they are never out of a game. And once again, they showed that last night by coming back. But, yeah, they were down 12 points in the second half. They trailed 42-30 with 15:48 left in the game. They tied the game at 60 with less than 3 minutes left to play. Couple of free throws by Elijah Martin. That gave Florida the lead. Free throws, we've talked about this in the tournament. I mean, they are an essential part of winning these games because we saw in the Final Four games, you know, you miss it, and that could very well dictate whether you win a game or not. I mean, we saw that with Tyrese Proctor missing it, but yeah, Houston was able to put up a final shot. Well, actually, no, Houston got the ball, and they had a chance to, tie the game or possibly go ahead with a three-pointer, but they could not get a shot off. They couldn't get a shot off. Florida played really good defense on the final play of the game, and Emmanuel Sharp was putting up the shot, but it was an up and down if he touched the ball again. So he just let the ball just sit there, and Florida was able to jump on it. Condon was able to secure it, and that was basically the end of the game. So we didn't get to see a final shot. I was hoping the game would go into overtime to add more excitement to it, but that ended up not happening. Florida was not good in the first half when it came to turnovers. They had 9 first-half turnovers. Their lowest scoring first half in a title game since 2011. And we talked about deficits. So, yeah, they were down 6 in the round of 32. They were down 10 in the Elite 8, down 9 in the Final Four, and then they were down 12 in the title game. They came back against UConn. They came back against Texas Tech, against Auburn, and against Houston. They like we said, they are battle tested, and it's just unfortunate for Houston. They have come so close these in recent years, and they had it. The game was in their grasp, and unfortunately, like the teams that have gone up against Florida, they let it fall between them. Todd Golden, head coach of Florida, won his first title, and the age difference. I mean, Golden is 39 years old, and Kelvin Sampson for Houston is 69 years old. He was denied his 800th win and the national title. And then looking at the stats, the comparisons to both teams, we can do that. They both didn't shoot the basketball great. Florida shot at about 40%. Houston about 35%. Both teams were not good shooting the three. Florida was 6 of 24 from three. Houston was 6 of 25 from three. Free throws. Florida was 81% from the free throw line. Houston was 64%. Rebounds were about the same. Defensive rebounds, Florida was better than Houston, and offensive rebounds, Houston was better than Florida there. But yeah, turnovers. Florida did have 12. Houston had 8. And yeah, like I said, though, very entertaining game. It was a great way for the college basketball season to end. I did not win anything. My bracket tourneys, I got knocked out, because I had Duke in most of them. And then, I did have Houston in another one, and they lost. But I wasn't going to win. Had Houston won, I wouldn't have won anything. But, yeah, no, it was a good tournament. We saw some really good games down the stretch in this tournament. And I know there's a lot of people complaining because, we didn't really get to see, a Cinderella team go far, and, you saw all 1 seeds in the Final Four. But, we can't really make assumptions until we kind of see this, replicate itself. If we continue to see 1 seeds, next year and beyond that, then maybe there is a little bit of a problem. But you got the best of the best. And like I said, we saw some really good games over the weekend and, even before that. So, yeah, college basketball is over. And congratulations to the Florida Gators on winning the title. Again, tough loss for Houston, They were right there. They were right there. They have gotten so close so many times in recent years, but it didn't happen. It didn't happen last night. So, yeah, let me know what you guys think about the game from last night. Let me know in the comments. So, we are going to take our first break of the show. And then when we come back, we will talk about the NFL draft. The draft is coming up. We got a couple weeks now. Now our focus is on that, along with some other things that are going to be starting soon, playoffs in the NBA and things like that. But the draft is coming up. A couple of things I wanted to talk about. We're going to talk about Travis Hunter maybe going to Cleveland. We'll talk about the Giants meeting with Abdul Carter. And, obviously, teams are going to meet with prospects, but you might not necessarily draft them. But we'll just get into that and, how adding a player like Abdul Carter would be beneficial for the Giants. And then, some other things, Shedeur Sanders, the running backs as well. We'll get into all that when we come back from our next break. So, with that being said, stick around, and we'll be right back here on the GSMC Sports Podcast.